That's it.
And here comes the package on the floor. With 2 seconds. Here it goes for the win.
What is up, Terps fans? Welcome into another Fear the Podcast. I'm Matt Modderno, going solo here again today, but got a good one for you. Just going to go through each of the players, what their roles should be, where they should fit into the rotation, and what we should expect from them production-wise on a player-by-player basis, and then we'll kind of close this up with some actual team predictions, where they should finish in the Big Ten, all that kind of stuff. We'll have a deeper dive on the Big Ten overall coming closer to the season here, just to get you up to speed on who the teams to pay attention to are in conference, and then also we'll be doing some individual pregame, matchup previews, the Georgetown game, things like that. So if there's other stuff you want to hear before the season starts, just let me know. Also have just like a true deep dive into the offensive and defensive scheme, system, terminology, all those kinds of things from what Buzz Williams and staff did at Texas A&M. And how they'll employ that at Maryland. So if you want to really nerd out and be able to wow your friends with the true behind the scenes of this is what they're doing, this is what they're trying to do, hey, they're playing this kind of defense, they like this kind of defense. On offense, these are their goals, that sort of thing. Definitely going to check that one out for us. I think you'll like it. It's over an hour long, but I think it's a good opportunity to learn. Got a really smart coaching friend of mine, Bryce Hendricks, to come in and he watched hours of film to prep for this, so I think he saw everything that Texas A&M did last year. And we'll talk about how it translates for Maryland this year with this roster and how it'll work in the Big Ten. So stay tuned for that one coming up here, next week or so probably. For this episode, like I said, we're just going to get into kind of player-by-player stuff here a bit. Let's start minute allocation. So 200 minutes in a basketball game. Obviously, the numbers don't have to add up to that because not everybody is going to play every game and things like that. So their minutes per game may not reflect, them playing in every game of the season and so forth. So the guy who most likely to lead this team in minutes, I think, has to be Miles Rice. I could see him just really being, the engine for this team and the guy that makes things go and stepping into that sort of Wade Taylor-esque role coming over from what the staff ran at Texas A&M. So I have him at about 28 minutes per game. Again, not crazy for that to be the person who leads the team in minutes, but there is a decent amount of depth. Buzz seems to like to keep it fairly well spread out, so I don't think you'll see anybody kind of going crazy where they're playing 35 minutes a game or anything like that. Although, I could be wrong. We'll see. I've got Pharrell Payne at 27 minutes. He was about 20-ish last season. This year, I think 7 or 8 more minutes per game is probably a reasonable expectation. Does pick up some fouls every once in a while and things like that. So they'll want to keep him fresh when they can. But there's not really, he needs to be the guy for them in the front court, I think. And there's not really a plan B from the center position in terms of guys who could theoretically supplant him as the guy in the front court. So I think from Pharrell's perspective, need him to stay healthy, need him to stay out of foul trouble. And high 20 minutes per game is a good way to do that. But also, they're going to want to play fast and furious, from put all your effort out there while you're on the court. He's not going to be allowed to loaf and hide and things like that as a rim protector. So can't see him getting much lower than that. So that's really kind of where I landed on that high 20s number. So 27, 28. Next, I have Solomon Washington and Elijah Saunders, both at 25 minutes per piece in the front court here as well. Front court wing, however you want to describe both of them. Washington as your just crazy switchable defender who can lock everybody down 1 through 5. Even in the past when Buzz has had essentially a stopper, that guy hasn't played every minute of every game. And I think, again, you want him to play as hard as he can defensively. Probably can't do that role at 35 minutes per game. Same with Saunders. I think, again, he's closer to that high 20s mark, so 25, 26, something like that, where he's just going to be a rugged rebounder, floor spacer, and just do a lot of the little things for this team. I really like Elijah's game, so I think, if he gets closer to 30, that wouldn't hurt my feelings personally, but I do think we'll get a pretty healthy rotation. Like I said, next I have Isaiah Watts at 24 minutes per game. This guy just makes a lot of sense in the backcourt next to Miles Rice. They played together pretty well 2 years ago at Washington State, so hopefully you can rekindle a little bit of that magic here. They need him to be a floor spacer 3-and-D guard for them, essentially. So I think Watts, finds himself in that close to mid-20s mark at 24. All the preseason buzz that we heard from Buzz about David Coit or Diggy Coit makes a lot of sense. He likes those guards that can kind of have some green light offensively and just go get you a bucket within the structure of what he's looking to do, which again, we'll get more into that in that offensive deeper dive coming up here, in a future episode. So David Coit I have in the 21 to 22 minute per game ballpark. Probably not the best perimeter defender on the group here, but better than I think he got credit for at Kansas. He'll just put in effort. And I've mentioned this on past episodes. A friend of mine who coached him in prep school said, this is a dude who will just try at the very least. He's not the biggest or most athletic, but the consistent effort will be there. And I think when you're playing both sides of the ball as a slightly undersized guard in the Big Ten, it just kind of takes its toll. So I can't see them getting him 30 minutes per game or anything like that. So I think low 20s probably makes sense. So I have him at 21. Next, I have Darius Adams right at 20 minutes per game. Maybe he's 19, maybe he's 18, maybe some nights he's 23, 24, but just somewhere in that high teens, low 20s sort of ballpark. It really depends, I think, on how quickly they can get him back and healthy and integrated in what they want to do. So we'll see what that looks like. But to me, he's a pretty good bet to play a decent amount of minutes. Hopefully he shoots the ball a little bit better than he did his last year at high school because, again, they need some shooting on the perimeter here. Obviously, no more Rickey's Passmore for the season, so I think that creates a little bit more of a pathway to minutes for somebody like Andre Mills. I have him at 14 a game as really just a slasher. This is a guy that could see his minutes kind of exceed my expectations here, but I haven't heard enough yet about how he's really looking in practice and things like that to go much higher than that. So I'm hedging a little bit here with that 13, 14 number. And we'll see if he can play his way into more, over the course of the season. So hopefully, I like what I've seen from his high school tape. So I'd like to see Andre be a little more of a focal point. Next, I've got George Turkson. That's switchable, probably power forward essentially for this team. Can he be your future Solomon Washington replacement when Washington graduates? Turkson may be a little bit more of a four, like a true four, than Washington is. But again, an athletic guy who can run the floor really hard and be switchable defensively. So I think that's going to guarantee him a certain amount of minutes. I honestly don't know if you follow a coach that you redshirted for to his next stop. There isn't some expectation, you're at least a healthy enough member of the rotation. So again, I got him around 10. And then Colin Metcalf also around 10. A guy that can come in, play some solid minutes, block some shots, and just be a presence defensively for them. If he's a little more efficient offensively than he was at Northeastern, then maybe this is a guy that kind of creeps his way in that 12, 13 ballpark. Got Guillermo Del Pino next at 7 minutes per game. Just can't see him getting a ton of minutes as anything other than a spot backup point guard, with Rice and Coit and those guys playing such heavy minutes on ball. And then rounding things out, Alex Alston, I've got about 5 minutes per game. I think he's probably a year away, but just given the lack of size from some of these other options, I think he'd be a tough one to redshirt. Personally, maybe a Nick Blake or a Josiah Harper are your guys that redshirt this first year and kind of work their way into things at the college level. So for Alex, just somebody that can come in and hit a few more shots in the front court, I think will be valuable. We'll see if he's more ready to go than that and can play a few more minutes. But that's kind of where I've got guys. So based on those minutes, this is where I'm seeing people at production level. Again, this is just totally from me and what I project for them role-wise. I think a reasonable projection for Miles Rice is somewhere in that 11.5 points per game. Maybe he gets close to 5 or 6 assists, something like that. 3 rebounds, a steal and a half could be theoretically on the table here. I have it at 1.2 steals right now, so a little random and specific, but we'll see what he finishes out at. Got him at 33% from 3. Slowly needs to creep his way into the mid-30s here, I think, for them to be as effective as you'd want, and for teams to take him seriously as a driver, which is, I think, what you really want from Miles Rice. Diggy Coit, 8.2 points per game, 2.8 assists, 38% from 3. I could see him coming in, running a little offense for them, but also just being a guy that gets a green light to shoot from their perimeter. And I think they need that. And so I think he'll be a guy that gets a decent amount of run and some scoring Pharrell Payne, I've got at 12 points and 8.6 rebounds, 1.6 blocks. Just sort of a slight uptick based on those minutes, based on what he averaged at Texas A&M. Again, this is a spread the wealth kind of system, especially, you usually have one high usage guard like that. So Rice not being 18 points per game might be surprising based on some of what they did at A&M. But I do think this is going to have to be a little bit more committee based because they don't just have a guy ready to kind of take on that load offensively the same way. So Pharrell Payne, again, going up from 20 to 28 minutes per game. I think going up from 10 and 5 to 12 and 8 or 9 seems pretty realistic. Solomon Washington took a little bit of a step back production-wise last year than prior to the year before, so I think he gets a little closer to those numbers. I've got him at 6.1 points, 5.4 rebounds, 1.1 steals. Next is Elijah Saunders, who I've got at 8.9 points, 5 rebounds, 38% from 3. He talked about this on this podcast about being closer to a 40% three-point shooter. They need him to be. I think he will be. The shot looks clean. It's just sort of a clunky system with what they were doing in Virginia, so I think we'll see an improvement there from him. Next, I have Isaiah Watts at 8.2 points per game, 37% from 3. Still question of who really starts at that other guard spot. I think Watts makes sense to me as a defender floor spacer. Could be Coit, again, based on some of the praise we heard from Buzz Williams. So it remains to be seen a little bit of what that'll ultimately look like here. And then next we've got Darius Adams. So freshman, it's kind of hard to judge. He could come in and set the world on fire. We just did this last episode about what it would take for him to be an all-time freshman here. Again, I'm not expecting that right out of the gate. I do think year 2, Adams will be a really, really, really good Big Ten player, but might just be a little bit of growing pains. We've seen it before, especially with freshmen. Having that injury to start the year, you miss a little bit of time. It could take a while to just fully integrate into what the team wants to do. So I think that'll slow him down a little bit. I've got him at 8.3 points. Next, we've got Andre Mills. I've got him at 5.6 points per game. Again, I think he could get higher. That's the guy that's kind of the biggest wild card for me. But I see him really more as a lockdown defender, switchable guy on the perimeter that can guard maybe 1 through 3 realistically. But the shot is the swing skill for him. If he's going to be an effective slasher in an offense that doesn't have a ton of spacing, I think he's somebody that needs to be able to shoot the ball himself. Again, looking at what buzz of teams have done historically, there's a lot of guys in that high single digit 5 to 9 kind of range. So that's really what I'm forecasting here as well. Metcalf and Turkson I both have at 4.1 points per game each. That adds up to 76.9 points per game, which is right around where they were last year at Texas A&M. So that's probably the number you shoot for. Maybe it's a little higher. Maybe they are a slightly faster team this year. We'll see. But again, it's probably high 70s at best here. So maybe that's a plus or minus a point per game for one of these guys. But again, that's really what I'm projecting. Just with that in mind, I think because this team is really a sort of bet on depth and physicality and rugged rebounding and things like that, I think the floor is actually pretty decent. I know maybe you've heard some of the other Big Ten podcasts and things like that out there that just don't really know what to expect from Maryland. But again, if you're just going to dominate the boards, I think that's pretty solid expectation that you're going to be competitive. And I'm maybe slightly higher on this group and how some of the pieces fit together than others. So I'm projecting them to be 6th in the Big Ten, probably somewhere in the 22-9 mark on the season, something to that effect, maybe 21-10, low 20s, I think is probably the sweet spot. This is a team I could see going about 12-8 in the Big Ten. Last year, the 6th place team went 13-7. I've got them at 6th place at 12-8. So it's somewhere in that ballpark, but there was a lot of sort of scrunching of guys or of teams, in that 14-12 win, top half of the Big Ten last year. So that's really my expectation. I think this is a team that could go 14-3 or something like that at Xfinity. They just need them to be a good home team, essentially, to really have a shot to maximize. So I guess the question is a 22 win team a tournament team? I think if you're 6th place in the Big Ten, it means you got some pretty good wins during the course of the conference season. So I think that's enough to get them into the tournament. I have them as an 8 seed. That's probably higher than most folks do. Uh, maybe it's an 8, 9, 10 kind of play. We'll see. If you creep closer to that 10 line, probably means you were a bubble team. So it's somewhere in that. I think optimistically, if this team was an 8 seed and wins 18 games, like I would be super pleased with that for year one from Buzz Williams. Everybody's talked about how it takes him a little while to just kind of find his groove at a particular spot. So if you can just make the tournament in year one, I think that's really hard to complain about overall here too. So how do they do that? How do they get to sixth place? What does that look like? Again, I think it's about balance. You've got a really just sort of solid 1 through 5, starting five. Last year with the Crab Five, they were all really good, and then that was kind of it. I don't think the highs are as high, but I think this team will really excel 6 through 10 and just being pretty solid. I do think the Raquise Passmore loss is a real loss and hurts this team a bit. I might have been a little higher. That may even make me kind of project this as more like a 7th or 8th place team in the Big Ten, just because of that one last switchable depth piece that could be a slasher and things like that for them offensively. I need guys like Adams to play more like sophomores than freshmen and be instant offense, especially if he's coming off the bench here. But this is really going to be a team that's based on being a strong defensive core, and you can do that. Like if Washington and Payne are as good as they were, for this coaching staff last year, and Elijah Saunders takes everything he learned from his stops at San Diego State and Virginia and employs them here, like that's a really tough front court to score on. They're going to be big and rugged. They're not the biggest in terms of overall height, but just a solid group of reasonably athletic guys here as well. And I think that's going to be a really tough front court to score on. And this is a team that wants to keep people out of the middle. And again, I talk about that more in this deeper dive episode with Bryce here that you'll hear in a week or two probably. Offensively, it's just really the question if these guys can get to that high end of their shooting outcomes. If David Coit or Diggy Coit is high 30s, if Elijah Saunders is high 30s, if Miles Rice is closer to mid 30s, if Darius Adams is mid 30s, if Watts is, did I say Watts already? If Watts is high 30s, like those are all optimistic outcomes. But if a few of them hit, this team will have enough to create the kind of gaps in space for drivers that they really want offensively, and then hopefully you can just kind of keep dominating the offensive glass. So I'm more optimistic that more of those things will happen than not. I think this team does have more shooting potential than that last Texas A&M team did. You were really relying on like 2 guys to shoot for the whole roster last year. So can Solomon Washington be closer to 30%? Those kinds of things will just make a huge difference for them and in the margin. So we'll see ultimately what it looks like. If this is an 8 seed, this is maybe a team that wins a game in the tournament. To me, that is an absolute best case scenario, and you take it here. So overall, I think this is a solid but not elite team, and this is a pretty top-heavy looking group here in the Big Ten. Like Purdue is by all accounts on everybody's top 3 list in the country. Michigan's on a lot of top 10 lists. So like some big firepower there. Illinois is in some top 25s, things like that. Wisconsin, Michigan State, you'll see a lot of those familiar names. But Maryland, I think, can sneak into that mix. Like, can they be more healthy than a team like Oregon and things like that? That might really be the separator or differentiator. There's not a lot of room for margin for a guy like Pharrell Payne to get hurt. That would probably be the hardest guy to survive an injury loss to. So we'll just kind of see how they protect him minutes-wise and keep him healthy and things like that. So maybe they sneak into the top 25 at some point during the season, but this is probably a just outside kind of group in my opinion. And like I said, if they win one tournament game, I'm all good. Let me know in the comments what you think. Is there anybody I totally whiffed on production-wise, or you're expecting a much bigger role from, or less of a role from? I'd really love to hear from other Terps fans on what you guys are thinking, and we'll just see if any of these predictions come true. Maybe I'll do a recap at the end of the season and just go line by line here and see how they held up, and that'll help tweak for next year's predictions, and maybe we'll have a little bit better understanding of what to expect from Buzz Williams and company to make next year's predictions a little bit easier. So again, pretty solid group, a lot of depth, and I think this is a team that can be in the top half of the Big Ten and get into the tournament and maybe win a game. So let me know if you think that's enough for you in year one of Buzz Williams. I'd love to again hear from Terps fans. As always, if you can hit that like button for us on YouTube, really appreciate that. Rate, review, subscribe, all those good things, and more stuff to come with the season underway. It's officially October, so this is now college basketball season. Again, tough Terps football loss, tough Ravens losses. Commanders have a role in here, but for the most part, I'm ready to just move on to basketball season personally. So we got some more good stuff coming from you. Again, as always, fear the turtle.